Good evening. This is Natasha Nicole Pandon, your fourth reporter about the social, political, economic, and cultural issues in the Philippine history. So the fifth is the 1973 Philippine Constitution, the background of change and promulgation of the new Constitution. And a preface to a premiere in the amended 1973 Philippine Constitution, former President Ferdinand E. Marcos quoted the statement he made during the opening session in the 1971 Constitutional Convention, which is no constitution, whether old or revised, can by itself solve the intricate problems of any nation, nor can it offer any magic or easy cures, but a constitution is a testament to reason, and therefore it can be constitute a rational basis for confronting national problems. The 1935 Constitution was a constitution drafted when the Philippines was a colony of the United States of America. Its drafting was done after the U.S. Congress gave its approval for its drafting. It was then submitted to the President of the United States for his approval, which he did. Considering the background by which it was drafted and approved, there was no doubt that it had provision that did not reflect the ideas and aspirations of the Filipino people. Likewise, the 1935 Constitution was no longer responsive to the needs of a country which is not a colony of the U.S. anymore. The conditions and problems of the country after 40 years of 1935 Constitution being in effect had changed, and there was a need for new set and up policies. Thus, having this Regionale Resolution Number 2, Section 1967 was approved by both Houses and Congress in joint session, which provided of the election of delegates to the Constitutional Convention in 1971. The delegates to the Constitutional Convention met on June 1, 1971 at the Fiesta Pavilion of the Manila Hotel for the inauguration of the Constitutional Convention, where it also held some of its session. However, it later transferred to the new Quezon City Hall. The convention was interrupted by the proclamation of martial law on September 21, 1972. 11 members of the convention were arrested. It convened and finished their work. A plebiscite for its approval by the people was scheduled. However, President Marcos issued assemblies to ratify the new constitution by referendum. The ratification was held from January 10 to 15, 1973. Next will be the salient features of 1973 Constitution, which has the following salient features. First will be the establishment of the parliamentary government with the Prime Minister as the head of government, exercising both executive and legislative powers, and the President as ceremonial head of state only. Second will be the legislative powers vested in a cameral National Assembly composed of assemblen, elected by the people, which would be composed of the President, the Vice President, member of the old Congress willing to serve, and all the CONCON delegates voting for the transitory provisions, and they would enjoy all the rights and privileges of regular assembly members. Third will be emphasize the duties, obligations, rights of citizens. Voting for qualified voters was made compulsory. Illiterates granted the right of suffrage, and the voting age of the youth lowered to 18-year-old. And lastly will be under the transitory provisions of this Constitution, all decrees, proclamations, and orders of President Marcos were legalized, and his terms was extended. The preamble of 1973 Constitution states that we sovereign Filipino people, imploring the aid of Almighty God in order to build a just and human society and establish a government that shall embody our ideas and aspirations, promote the common good, conserve and develop our patrimony, and secure to ourselves and our prosperity the blessings of independence and democracy under the rule of law and a regime of truth, justice, freedom, love, equality, and peace. Do ordain and promulgate this constitution. The following are citizens of the Philippines under 1973 Constitution. Those who are citizens of the Philippines at the time of the adoption of this Constitution, those whose fathers or mothers are citizens of the Philippines, those who elect Philippine citizenship pursuant to the provisions of the Constitution of 1935, those who are naturalized in accordance with law. A female citizen of the Philippines who marries an alien shall retain her Philippine citizenship unless by her act or omission she is deemed under the law to have renounced or citizenship. Under the 1973 Philippine Constitution, the Philippine territory comprises the Philippine archipelago with all the islands and water embraced therein, and all the other territories belonging to the Philippines by historic right of legal title, including the territorial sea, the airspace, the subsoil, the seabed, the insular shelves, and the other submarine areas over which the Philippines has sovereignty or jurisdiction. The water around, between, and connecting to the island of the archipelago, irrespective of their breadth and dimensions, form part of internal water of the Philippines. And next for that will be the amendments of the 1973 Constitution, which shifted from the presidential form of the government to parliamentary form of government, was thought of by the delegates of the convention as a way of the government to be more responsive and more responsible to the people. However, several amendments were done to the 1973 Constitution after its approval in 1973, most significant which was the interim National Assembly being replaced by an interim Batasang Pambansa. Thus, the National Assembly was never convened. This 1976 amendments contain several other provisions, such as President Marcos would also become the Prime Minister. Thus, he would exercise the powers of both the executive and the legislative. And when they deemed it necessary, he was authorized to make laws outside and parliament. These amendments were ratified in the referendum plebiscite held on October 16 to 17, 1976, and were proclaimed in full force and effect as October 27, 1976, under Proclamation Number 5095 issued by President Ferdinand E. Marcos. Also, in 1980, another amendment to the 1973 Constitution was done and was ratified by the voters in a plebiscite held on January 30, 1980. This amendment extended the retirement age of the members of the judiciary from 65 to 70. In 1981 as well, further amendments were done to the 1973 Constitution. The President, as head of the state and chief executive, may run for as many 6 years terms as he wished. In case of his death or incapacity, the executive power would be exercised by a group called the Executive Committee until the election of the successor. Creation of a regular parliament called the Batasang Pambansa, which could only check the Prime Minister and not the President. For number 6 as well, the 1987 Philippine Constitution, which is the historical development prior to the adoption of the 1987 Constitution. In February 1986, a snap election was held. Ferdinand Marcos was proclaimed winner by the Batasang Pambansa. Mrs. Corazon Aquino and her supporters maintained that massive cheating was committed during the elections. The widow of Benigno Aquino refused to accept defeat. Thus, she went around to the country and called for civil disobedience. Juan Ponce Enrile and Fidel Ramos, two of Marcos' men, staged a coup d'etat. This resulted to the AGSA People Power, which toppled down to Marcos' government. Mrs. Aquino was installed president on March 23, 1986. She issued Proclamation Number 3, under which a provisional constitution of the Republic of the Philippines, known as the Freedom Constitution, was promulgated. A transitional revolutionary government was established on April 23, 1986 as well, Proclamation number 9 was issued. It provided for the appointment of 48 CONCOM commissioners who would meet the following qualifications as stipulated for in the same proclamation. And first will be that no person shall be appointed member of the commission unless he be a natural born citizen in the Philippines. Second will be a qualified voter, and last will be a person with recognized probity, independence, nationalism, and patriotism. And also only 47 commissioners qualified. The inaugural session for the Constitutional Commission was held on June 2, 1986 at the Batasang Pambansa, with Vice President Salvador H. Laurel leading the formal opening. Justice Cecilia Munoz Palma was unanimously elected president for the convention. Although there were heated and prolonged discussions on issues like death penalty, economic policies, land reform, form of government, and the retention of American military bases in Clark and Subic. The CONCOM was able to finish its work after more or less 111 days. President Aquino issued Proclamation number 58, proclaiming the Constitution on February 11, 1987. The Supreme Court, however, ruled the date of proclamation was February 2, 1987. When the people ratified it, which was in conformity with Article 18 of the Constitution, which states that the Constitution shall take effect immediately upon the ratification by majority of the votes and shall supersede all the previous constitutions. And that will be all my report. Thank you so much.